Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Put the Guidebook Down, brought to you by Kultura Travel with me, Kiara, the creator, as your host. In today's episode, we're going to get into the cultural faux pas, the travel mistakes that you don't know you're making. Have you ever had the experience where you are walking into a store and the employee greets you and says, "Hi, welcome," and you're so caught off guard that you end up saying, "Welcome" to them back? I think we've all been there. Might not have been exactly with the word welcome, but similar situation. Another is, have you ever been in a restaurant while traveling or just in your home country? And you look around and you see everyone eating with their hands, but you're the only one eating with utensils? No, you're not alone. Mistakes happen. But in this episode, we're going to break it down to see what travel mistakes you're making without even realizing that they're happening, so you don't end up being that tourist. The first one we're going to break down is language missteps or miscommunication. This happens a lot, especially when traveling into countries where English is not the first language or maybe even spoken. And we try our best to communicate with what little knowledge of the local language we have, maybe what little knowledge of English, French, English that someone may have, because you're basically working together to find a common shared language. And sometimes it just comes down into gestures, facial expressions, and then when all is lost, we now have the technology to break out the Google Translate or any translator app now that's out there these days that you're using. However, sometimes we make mistakes in that time period where we're trying to find a commonality in spoken languages or gestures, etc., without even realizing it. Here's a personal example. When I was in Moldova and I didn't speak Romanian, I would greet my students and colleagues by saying hi and just keep saying hi. And people would just look at me kind of confused and look around. I was like, what am I saying? What is wrong with this? I don't understand. It wasn't until I started my Romanian classes where I learned that hi also means let's go. It's like, let's go and get going, do this, etc. But it's not spelled as H-I as we do in English. It's spelled as H-A-I. Pronounced the same, but different context and has different meaning. And this is not something just specific to the English language, right? We see this with cultural crossovers all the time in languages where one word in a language that you're speaking or know may have a completely different meaning. And I remember learning this in my French class. I'm blanking on the exact term that my French teacher would use, but it's kind of like imposters. Like biscuit, you would think because it looks like biscuit in French, means biscuit in English, but actually it means cookie. Looks the same, different meaning, right? So these are just some examples of when language can become a cultural barrier or a barrier to coming to a full understanding just from pronunciation and context of using a language, right? We also experience this in our expression with our voice when it comes to the pronunciation, because a lot of language comes from that intonation, inflection points to help convey a point. In some languages, for example, in Russian, they follow different speech patterns and tones in order to express a concept or idea that may be completely different from English. A lot of languages tend to have that rising inflection with questions, right? So you start at a lower tone and then increase it when you're coming to rise up at the end with the question mark. The question mark's implied. However, we don't always have that in every language, right? Or maybe it's expressed in a different inflection point. This can lead to miscommunication and create a new barrier to understanding. That's why when traveling to another country, I always say, not just learning the local language for like a couple of terms, phrases, etc., to help with overcoming the language barrier and to showcase interest in the local culture, which is extremely important. But this also helps with language missteps. You don't have to be in that situation where someone says thank you to you and then you end up saying like thank you or saying like welcome back. What happened in my first opening statement with going to a store and saying welcome back to the greeter. Another one that I mentioned in the beginning is when it comes to eating. I don't know about you, but a big thing with me in traveling is just being a little bit extra conscious when it comes to tipping culture, how you eat certain dishes, etc. Because I don't want to be that tourist that's sitting there eating maybe a local dish with utensils when you're supposed to be eating it with your hands. I'll give an example. In Indonesia, there is a typical street food, common street meal that's usually like some fried chicken with a side of white rice and then usually like a red sauce they call sambal, which is very spicy and not for those who can't handle the spice, let me tell you. But with my first week there, it was intuition to ask for a fork or knife or something to cut up the chicken, right? That's a big no-no. We had to learn that this is one of the dishes in the region where you use your hands and it's meant to be messy. A big indication from the context of it was even at the food stalls, there was always a place to wash your hands. And this was for before you eat and then also after. So you could have clean hands before you leave and start your meal, which was amazing. But it also was a good indication that this was a food dish for eating with your hands. You would rip into the chicken and then grab it with the rice and then put it into the sambal and then eat it directly with your hands. And there's a bunch of locals that have different techniques of how you eat. And my host family like to say you push it with your thumb to get everything into your mouth and one bite so it's not like half in your hands. And you just want to make sure you're always eating everything that you pick up. But that is again like something to learn. In American culture, we tend to eat a lot with utensils, not so much with our hands. Another one is in Eastern Europe. We have burgers, right? In America, we eat burgers just like regular picking up with your hands. Maybe some people hold the wrappers of the burger to eat it. In Eastern Europe, they like to serve it with non-latex gloves. This was something that I also wasn't aware of, but for burgers or meals that they consider messy that you eat with your hands, you would put the gloves on before you eat to help avoid getting your hands dirty. So again, very interesting, not something you would know, and it prompted a conversation with the locals who were with us to why you eat it like that or why they serve it like that, etc. And then as an American, we have a big tipping culture here in the States that's not necessarily the same or even in some countries abroad. This is something that I've worked in food service as a waitress. I understand the importance of tipping in America because of how the wages are built in. But in some countries, such as in the EU, the employees have a higher wage when working in certain industries to account for the tipping that normally the US would be very reliant on. So the tipping is not necessarily the same there as it is here. And that's something that I'm always hypersensitive about is like, oh, how much do I tip in this country? Where do I tip, etc. Especially in some countries where the tipping is just very deeply embedded into the culture. The first one that comes to mind about this is especially in Egypt. If you haven't been to Egypt and you're reading articles and trying to figure out what to expect before going, if you're planning to travel to the pyramids, the Sphinx, etc., it's a very common bucket list adventure. One of the top things that showed up in my research was to account 20% of your entire cost to just tips. For me, that was huge. I was like, 20% of my entire cost of my trip just for tipping? That's crazy. And again, this is coming because I'm a budget traveler. I was just like, I'm always very conscious about this stuff. And it's true. It's like 100% true. Anything really, like from a photo to food, there's an expectation with tips. And if you don't necessarily give a tip, then you might experience following, slight harassment, etc. It's just the way that their culture is around tipping. That's just an example, but also one that I'd like to use as encouragement for you to do that research prior to going. You're not in an awkward situation where you're in a country where tips are highly expected, but you maybe come for a country that doesn't do tipping and you don't leave one, which leads into this whole disagreement or miscommunication. Very important to do this research in advance to avoid that awkward situation in the end. Another big one is the cultural norms. What does this mean? This refers to anything with dress, etiquette, gestures. It's the other context that comes with a culture or language. For example, a big one when it comes to Western travelers visiting into the Middle East, into more conservative countries, is the dress code, especially when it comes to women. And this is something that I highly recommend anyone should read up on before leaving for a trip, especially women. You don't want to be that tourist who's standing in booty shorts and a sports bra, which may be common in your country for athleisure wear, in the middle of a mosque. Okay, this may be shocking to hear that people do this, given the knowledge out there and respect that comes with some of those actions, like, for example, being fully covered to go into a mosque. I've seen it. I was in a mosque in Egypt, a very popular tourist one, where I'm aware of how to dress with the conservativeness to go into a mosque. I've been in several, so I was like, okay, like I know what to pack. I go into the mosque with my friends and we see these Western Europeans wearing short shorts and crop tops in the middle of a mosque. And I was like, wow, that is a statement. Okay. The weather may be hot, but you're still in the local culture and country, so you need to give respect. And it doesn't look good to other tourists, other travelers, or even the locals because, again, we're all about cultural respect and context here at Kultura Travel. It's just being aware and doing your research. Everyone wants their very pretty photos and videos. So, or maybe just to dress comfortably given the weather and for example, in the heat. You don't necessarily want to be wearing the long pants, the long t-shirts, etc. But that is the cultural norm there. That's the cultural expectations, etc. And being back from our previous episode, the difference of being a traveler versus a tourist, the traveler is one who's aware of those cultural contexts and still adheres to them because they're giving respect to where they're visiting. Gestures is also a big one. I'm one who likes to talk a lot with my hands, in case you didn't notice from this video podcast, but in some cultures it could be considered rude to be talking very loudly with your hands, maybe come across as aggression, etc. So being aware of how you present yourself in a public setting could be a large cultural faux pas. I think one of the typical ones that I get a lot as an American is being extremely loud and then using a lot of gestures, talking with the hands and everything. And they like know I'm there and they're like, oh, that's an American. And I'm not saying this as a stereotype. It's, at least I can speak to myself. It is true. I have been shushed in multiple restaurants in different countries because I was talking too loud. And it's not out of anger. It's just excitement. And with Americans just getting excited and talking together can create a large amount of noise. So again, being aware of that so you're not that tourist. So there's a lot of different cultural faux pas going out there. I listed 3 of them, but really the one point I want to take from this is that do your research and then make sure you're being respectful based on those findings of the research, right? You are a guest in the country, you are a visitor, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to act the way you normally would in your home country there as well. Because if you do so, you could be coming across as offensive, lead to more miscommunication, could potentially create unsafe situations, and you're just there to immerse and explore the local culture and have fun. So the intention matters, but awareness of this goes a long way, which is why we're talking about this in this episode. So then how do you avoid this, right? How we talk about like what is the difference of a tourist and a traveler? How do you go on the deeper level to avoid the cultural faux pas, to really become a traveler and not just stuck into that touristy realm? I've said it before. I will keep saying it again and again and again, and it is a core pillar for Kultura Travel, is to do your homework, okay? Research the cultural etiquette, research some language, learn a couple of phrases, learn how to dress where you're going and what situations, etc. Go as far as to research the restaurant culture and food culture, right? Back to my example about like eating with your hands, tipping. This awareness does go a long way. Another one is observe your surroundings and tune into your senses. Look around at the locals around you, look around at the tourists around you. Mirror what the locals are doing, how they're dressing, how their behavior is, how they dress people, etc. They're the ones living there. This is their culture. Don't role model what the travel influencers are doing because they visited there for X amount of time. Don't copy what the other tourists are doing because it's okay in a large group to do so because safety in numbers. That doesn't make a difference. You're still being disrespectful. And the biggest one is when in doubt, ask. Humility beats assumptions. Asking also shows that you have interest, care, and respect in the local cultures. Additionally, as I highlighted in one of my previous episodes on this podcast, is that even just by asking and initiating a conversation with a local, you may be forming a new relationship. You may be building a new friendship. You might end up on a different side quest or adventure that was not part of your itinerary just because the local becomes excited to show you another aspect of their culture because of your increased interest in it. This kindness, this awareness, this genuine, authentic interest does go a long way. This is what helps you immerse into the local culture, community, etc. This is where you begin to grow as a person, shape your perspectives, and then maybe leave your vacation, your travel, etc. as a better version of yourself, which is what we're also all about at Kultura Travel. There's so much to experience. There's so much to learn when you're going on these trips and traveling into new cultures. Why not learn something? Why not try to immerse into the place you are rather than staying at the surface level of the destination by only taking photos and videos of those authentically curated destinations. Be open to new experiences. I would love to know what's the worst travel mistake that you've ever made, since I shared a couple of my experiences in the different realms of cultural faux pas. Send me your stories. I would love to hear them. We're all human. We grow. It's okay. Be sure to tune into our next episode of Put the Guidebook Down. And as always, please check out our website and our social media channels to learn more about Kultura Travel. And as we further develop the app and website, which we'll be releasing soon. Thank you so much.